Welcome back to this month's Roundtable, your all-in-one comprehensive view of what's happening across the real estate industry, straight from some of the industry's earliest technology adopters and foremost experts in technology, marketing, brokerage, construction, government policy, capital, and cybersecurity. As always, this is a three-part show. Part one, introductions, what's new for each Roundtable host in their business sector. Part two, sector focus. We're going to unpack and dive deep into the biggest news and trends affecting the industry. Part three, what does it mean for your business and what can you do over the next 30 days to outpace your competition? I'm Andreas, Senie, founder, host of CRECollaborative's CRECo.ai Roundtable, as well as brokerage owner and a technology growth strategist for both the nonprofit and for-profit sectors. Joining me this month, none other than Saul Klein, the original internet evangelist. Saul, always great to see you. Welcome back.
Great to be back.
Chris Abel, membership directed at ABC, Associated Builders and Contractors, all things in construction. Chris, there we are. Nice to see you as well here in the month of April. And Rebekah Carlson, founder, CEO, Carlson Integrated, all things marketing. And last but not least, Dan Wagner, Senior VP of Government Relations at the Inland Real Estate Group of Companies.
Hey, guys.
Great to have everyone back. As I say every month, this is my favorite time of the month where we get together, talk about what's happening in our respective areas, see where we can do better together as a group. And in true Brady Bunch fashion, Saul, you're to my right once again. Your whiteboard is full. What's happening on your side? And then I do want to note that Dan Wagner has to jump off 15 minutes in, and he's got a lot to say on 1031.
So I'd say you ought to start with Dan then.
Then we're starting with Dan.
I'll just throw this out there, and then we can talk about it off and on. So big news on March 15th, the Ides of March in the residential real estate space. The National Association of Realtors is in the process of settling with plaintiffs in antitrust litigation. And the big news for multiple listing services is it looks like they will cease to be an offer of compensation, and that agents who work with buyers will have to have a signed written agreement specifying what they're going to get paid before they actually show properties. Now, from that, lots of myths grow and lots of untruths surface. But right now, people are kind of looking at what could be a major change to the way residential real estate is bought and sold, having impact far beyond most people's current imaginations.
Well, nothing changes until something changes, and you're right. The headlines out there are incredible. Zero commissions from now on. Gone are the brokers. But before we talk about that, let's talk. Dan, tell us what's going on in the 1031 world. Why did you make time tonight? I know you had to be elsewhere, but you wanted to jump on. It was that important to you.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's kind of like Groundhog Day again. God bless President Biden, but he put into his budget that came out in the Green Book that he wants to cap the 1031 like-kind exchange at $500,000. And anybody that knows 1031 exchanges, that $500,000 is just like getting rid of it. And then the other thing he wants to do is double capital gains taxes, and he wants to eliminate stepped-up basis. So that's a big shockwave. Now, so what does that mean? Nothing's going to happen because Congress is. I mean, they got to pass these deadlines just to keep everything alive. So because of the House being Republican, nothing's going to happen with this. But the big thing is the election in November. So one of the things that we highlight in our world of realtor world, we highlight that we're not the Democrat Party, we're not the Republican Party, we're the Realtor Party. And so it's important that we educate all the members of Congress that we know and explain to them why those ideas are going to be very stifling to the economy, especially the local is everything. As Tip O'Neill once said, all politics are local. And so it's important that we can let our elected officials understand why the 1031 is so vital to our industry. And then related to all this stuff is are different rules and regulations that the Biden administration is doing through the Securities and Exchange Commission. President Biden put Chairman Gensler in for the Securities and Exchange Commission, and if you do any kind of private placement Reg D offerings, you need to be an accredited investor. Right now, it's $200,000 as an individual or $300,000 as a couple. And in April or through June, the SEC is going to put out a proposal that they probably want to shrink that pool and have less people to be able to be accredited investors. So that will lessen the amount of people to be able to get into this wonderful world of commercial real estate investing. And when, especially if you look at it from a perspective of African-American world, one of the things that some of my African-American friends talk about is wanting to have generational wealth, and they want to be able to invest. And if you shrink that pool, that doesn't make much sense to shrink it, especially if you have someone that's a lawyer, someone who's very well educated. I mean, the accredited investor is that definition is there to try to keep people who don't have the wherewithal or the education to invest, because they might be taken advantage of because there's some high level investment. So it's there for a reason. But boy, if you have your PhD and other thing, your accountant or whatever, you would know what you're getting into. But anyway, that's the thing that I want to really highlight is with the 1031 exchange. I'm honored to be part of so many organizations, the National Association of Realtors with Evan Lydiard, who's in charge of tax, the Real Estate Roundtable, Ryan McCormick, who's in charge of the 1031 exchange advocacy group with the Federation of Exchange Accommodators, the Qualified Intermediaries. All these groups came together and they did this macroeconomic study by Ernst & Young. And in 2021, they found out that approximately the 1031 supports about 976,000 jobs. It creates $48.6 billion in labor income and adds $97.4 billion to the U.S. GDP. So all of this related economic activity returns over $13 billion in annual tax revenue to the federal, state, and local governments, plus $6 billion of additional federal income taxes paid by 1031 exchangers due to foregone depreciation on the replacement properties, and created a combined total of more than $19 billion of tax revenue per year that the 1031 impacts. If you're going to cap the 1031, like President Biden suggests, at $500,000, which is basically eliminating it, that only generates about $1.95 billion a year. So you're going to try to generate $1.95 billion a year, but you're going to lose, that, like we talked about, the $19 billion. So you're going to, it's the same.
It's a net loss. Worse than that, it's if you take it hyper local, you have owners that will not sell their buildings.
Correct.
Those buildings fall into disrepair. And that's before you even touch on farmers and other urban areas where they just can't afford to sell at that generational wealth, right? As you've always said, it's the 401k for real estate.
It is.
It is instrumental.
It's so frustrating because, like, just in Naperville, Illinois, they had an old guy had this Kmart that went dark, but he bought it in the 70s. He was never going to sell because it was just going to kill him for capital gains. He had some nail salons or whatever. I mean, he made some income and he could care less. They were weeds growing out of the parking lot, and it was just awful for Naperville, which is this beautiful suburb of Chicago. Well, because inland, we talked to the mayor and the economic development folks. We explained the 1031 exchange, and they went to the owner and they said, "Hey, look, why don't you 1031 exchange, sell this and 1031 into another investment? There's so many different things. You go into apartments or whatever, and you defer your taxes." And by gosh, the gentleman said, "I didn't realize I could do that," and he did. And Costco bought this dilapidated, horrible, dark property, and the jobs that got created by the union jobs of tearing down that old Kmart, that huge strip center, and then the jobs of building the Costco, then the jobs that get created from Costco existing. I mean, and then the sales tax revenue going to the town. So that's on a very micro level. So when people say, "Oh, how do you say that accounts for 976,000 jobs?" Well, you do that nationwide. Every year you have all of this synergy, and so you can understand that includes so many different aspects of being able to have the carpet store is going to get more carpeting sold. And I mean, you when people people own stuff. They usually don't renovate it, but buyers renovate. And when you have people that are buying and there's liquidity in the marketplace, they're remodeling, they're putting in new stuff. And that's where all this job and synergy comes from. But I know all these, everybody on this call understands it, but we have to really wake up our elected officials and let them know that this is serious stuff. And, doubling capital gains, the farmers are apoplectic about stepped up basis. I mean, you'll basically get rid of the family farm if they get rid of that. So, so it's just, I want to really highlight to everybody, nothing's going to happen because of Congress being, the House being Republican, but if President Biden wins and the Democrats take over the House and Senate, we're going to have to do a really big job of working with the Realtor Party to educate Democrats of why this is not the way to go. And it's super important. Again, we're not Democrats, we're not Republicans, we're the Realtor Party, and we protect private property rights. And the 1031 has been in the tax code for 100 years. And we want to highlight it's not just, people think it's a fat cat thing. No, it's really part and parcel of why our economy is so successful in the United States. So I don't mean to take all the time this right off, but I know, Saul, do you think this is important?
Yeah, well, so I think this is incredibly important. And, it's interesting to me because you have to ask, what's the agenda here? Because the agenda can't be finance, and it can't be, prove the point with math. What is the agenda? We know that the tax code has been used and rightly so and well used over the years, and sometimes abused, but well used for social and economic engineering. What is the social and economic engineering agenda behind all of these cockamamie regulations and the push by the current administration to really destroy certain aspects of the economy? It is a shame that it's taken place. It's a shame that we have to educate people, but I like to, we got to explain to people, but we also, I think, got to help people understand that there's an agenda behind this. It's certainly not about making more money. So what is it? And this idea of accredited investors, I used to do Reg D offerings, and to change, what is the purpose of limiting that? It can't be, I don't know what it's not economic. And to take away stepped up basis, that's more social than anything else, I believe. And so what is this administration doing? It's got a history of doing things that if you look at them, you just have to blink your eyes. You can't believe some of the things that come out of that White House. It's amazing. We recently had the president say that realtors make too much money.
Right.
Right. He said this, realtors make too much money. They got to cut their fee. Well, realtors work on contingency. That means they work for free, work for free, work for free, work for free. And if they close a deal, they get paid. And so to say that home prices will come down because realtors won't be making as much money. So there's some insanity going on. Dan, I'm glad you're there to fight this. 1031 is building estates with pre-tax dollars. It makes huge sense. And it's not economics that's pushing this. This is major social change, and people got to wake up, take the blinders off, and vote in a way that we can preserve and continue to build the country, not destroy what we already have.
I'm going to another Zoom, you guys. Know that my heart's with you. I'm here with you in spirit. So we'll see you next month.
See you next month.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Dan.
Now, that 1031 exchange, I mean, it's not a dodge. It is lubricant. It helps keep money in real estate. It helps societies and communities grow and redevelop. Without it, as we all just noted, those properties will sit stagnant and they'll fall into disrepair. And then you'll have the cities taking them over through eminent domain when they have no choice, because they will have fallen into such disrepair. So let's keep properties in service, paying taxes, and yes, transacting where brokers make money, rightfully so, because we are a value and a service.
So social and economic engineering, Andreas, you got to remember.
I'm not going to. Well, that's a big box you're going to open.
Yeah. Well, so what we have, and people talk about tax loopholes. It's not so much that there are tax loopholes. These were intentionally placed in the tax code for a certain result. It's not that it's a loophole. They're placed there for a purpose. And so people that take advantage, I used to teach people what you want to do is understand the tax code so you can make it work for you. And so it's not people, so the part of this agenda, you see it all the time now, tax the rich, right? Have you seen that? Well, already, you look at who pays the most taxes and where do you set tax the rich? And then, you know what? Everybody, by today's standards, in 5 years with inflation, everybody's going to be rich just because of the inflation. So that's another way they get you, right? They set a limit on it, and before you know it, everybody's above that limit. So this is insanity that's going on, and yeah, people need to be aware of it. It's just amazing to me, right? Tax the rich. Who are they? You.
Well, when we're talking to being aware of things, that's a dovetail right over to marketing. Becca, how are things in your sector? Are you taxing the rich or promoting the poor?
I'm not taxing anyone, but I do pay my taxes, and I like tax time. I love paying my taxes.
And you're happy to pay your taxes for the services they provide.
Oh my gosh, yes. I was,
but yeah, go on.
I love tax time. I'm a numbers nerd, deep at heart. Like there's the creativity of marketing, and then there's the joy of the spreadsheet. And I do love numbers, and I love putting all of the numbers together. I had to get an accountant a couple of years ago. I was so sad because I'm now filing as an S corp because I'd been doing my own taxes since I was 18. And
that S corp is a vehicle that was built as a pathway to help you do better. Crosswalks help us cross the street as opposed to running amok. The 1031 exchange is a way to reinvest in real estate and to keep buildings in service.
Absolutely. And when you look as a sole proprietor of an LLC, which is what I am and have been,
and a WUBI,
the filing as an S corp, right? The filing as an S corp has enabled me to reinvest in growing my team and my company. So this little company that started off with 1 team member now has 15 team members. How does that happen? By being able to reinvest in my business.
Right. And the tax advantages that were granted through that S corp, just like a 1031 allows you to reinvest those capital gains.
Absolutely. They're brilliant tax structures that were created to build business and to build our economy, and feeling like I have a great sense of satisfaction on the fact that I have a team, and that I think about like my team members and their families and their children, and like, how cool is it that I get to have a company that helps to provide for their livelihoods? It's a really special gift to me. I'm actually incredibly honored on that topic, which is not related to marketing at all, but it is related to running a small business, which is what I do as a small marketing business.
Well, speaking of small marketing or businesses in general, Chris over on the construction side, Associated Builders and Contractors, your trades, your contractors, your small businesses. Sure. 1031 goes away, development goes away, property sits stagnant. Then at least I'll be able to afford my electrician.
There you go. Well, there's a few avenues here, because when you're talking about properties being left stagnant, and you mentioned something a little while ago about eventually having cities take over these properties. So if cities start taking over these properties, they remain stagnant, cities start taking over, and they start making moves on them as far as ABC contractors are concerned, depending on where you live and depending on where everything sets up. I know in Connecticut, that basically leaves it wide open for our local government to ask for PLAs to be put into place to start tearing down those projects, tearing down those buildings, or revamping those buildings, which that basically is telling the taxpayers that what they're going to be paying for. If they start putting PLAs in place to take care of those project labor agreements, there's a possibility in a place like ours where it says, okay, it's going to go through a project labor agreement, which is actually going to shut out merit shop contractors also, which will bring in less contractors to bid on it. And then
less revenue, less taxes, less local jobs.
Less people bidding equals taxpayers usually paying higher, because if you have three contractors bidding on a job versus 6, 7, or 8, the competitiveness of how much these things actually cost tends to go up. And if it's a city-run situation and taxpayers are paying for it, then taxpayers are paying more than they should be paying. But most taxpayers, the average taxpayer has no idea that that's actually happening. And we see it happen all the time around here. In Connecticut, we see it happen all the time.
But the cities do their best to protect against that, without diving into RFPs and the what and the why. Yep. But what about fair market value? If the city takes property over and its capital gains, are not available to be reinvested, that money leaves the state, leaves the municipality. Where does that money go? Yeah. When they take that asset?
Yeah.
Well, if Saul was forced to sell his car wash tomorrow and he couldn't reinvest in real estate, where would you put your funds? As an example.
Exactly.
That's a huge concern.
There's a lot
if it goes, and hopefully it won't go. It's always as Dan put it, a Groundhog Day type situation. It was created, it's there, but it always seems like the lowest hanging fruit, just like real estate brokerage fees. It may surprise you. Half the industry doesn't like paying brokers.
Yeah,
they're the smaller half that doesn't own as much property.
Yeah. No, this election.
Go ahead.
Like Saul was saying though, this election. It's huge. There's so many different avenues, and I don't usually get too much into the political side of things, but obviously ABC, there's a huge political advocacy piece aligned there, and it's all based around free enterprise and letting people spend their money and use their money the way they want to use their money. There's a lot of interesting things going on in Connecticut where private dollars, where owners and developers building private buildings are starting to be told where and how they should be spending their money, or how they can spend their money, point blank period. The biggest one was a few years ago with the recreational marijuana legislation here in Connecticut, where they said anyone private. So let's say Joe Schmo is going to build a dispensary. If it's over $5 million, they have to use a project labor agreement. So that's basically telling them you can build it. Second, you go over $5 million, you have to pay, you basically have to use the unions, it's not about for or pro union. It's, can I spend my money the way I want to spend my money? It's pretty interesting stuff. That wasn't what I was expecting to bring up in this show, but I got to say, just from listening to Saul and Dan right at the beginning, this is one of those shows where right off the bat, I'm like, God, this is what I want to listen to. This is what I want to watch, because I was curious where Saul and Dan were going to come in on the 1031 stuff, and also the, I had someone bring up the idea of the commission negotiations with the agents yesterday, and as soon as I heard that, I was like, I can't wait for tomorrow's show. I gotta know what Saul thinks about it.
I got a few brokers on the call, and everyone else dropped off. Although they still trade.
It's all right. I immediately wanted to know. To be honest with you, I didn't know. So this is for residential, correct?
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. It's buy-side compensation has always been applies to both, but as commercial brokers, it's part of the terms, right? So we are always negotiating. We are used to asking and quantifying why we're going to make what we're going to make. Okay. Residential, and Saul can expand on this, kind of got a free pass when the MLS included it as part of in their terms and conditions. It was just assumed. I actually just got a call today on an invoice for one of the resi commercial agents, who is trying to invoice a closed sale for her side of the commission. Well, it's not on the MLS. She has no agreement. It's going to be interesting. But Saul, I'll let you expand on that. You've been through it before and after.
Yeah, so this is very specific, and it has to do with the structure of the multiple listing service. And so the multiple listing service, the key feature of the multiple listing service is that it is a unilateral offer of compensation. So when you join the MLS rules, it's in the bylaws. I could pull them out of my drawer. The bylaws say that the MLS is a unilateral offer of compensation. Now, why does it say that? Well, because most of the MLSs in the United States are owned by realtor associations. There are a few that aren't, but most of them are. And so the National Association of Realtors, which doesn't have a multiple listing service, Nonetheless, the National Association of Realtors creates best practices, if you will, rules for running an MLS. And if you run your MLS and abide by the rules that NAR promulgates, then you're covered by NAR's, National Association of Realtors, errors and omission insurance. And so if you're running an MLS, you want to be covered by that errors and omission insurance. So you make sure your MLS complies with the NAR model rules. The model rules, the basic rule is that when you join a multiple listing service, you offer all of your listings to other brokers to sell. And if they sell them, no matter who they represent, if they sell them, you're going to share that compensation with them. And that benefits just about everybody. Well, it benefits everybody. Brokers have more property to sell. Brokers who list property have more people trying to sell their listings. Buyers benefit because they can go to one broker, they can see everything. Sellers benefit because they got more people that possibly can bring them offers. It's a miracle. It creates a great marketplace. And one of the things that makes it so is the fact that it's an offer of compensation. So what happened about 3 years ago, and now the Department of Justice has been after the National Association of Realtors for the last 40 years. And so you had a civil action, civil litigation in somewhere in the Midwest, civil litigation, and it became a class action litigation. And what the class action litigation was going after, it was saying, you know, this multiple listing service is collusion. All these multiple listing services are following these rules, and this is collusion, and this is artificially elevating commissions. And so you've got to somehow, we got to get rid of this. And so they filed this lawsuit, which grew. First one, first big one was Merrill in Illinois. Then the second big one was Sitzer Burnett, which is in Missouri, of which there was a judgment, which was $1.83 billion, tripled to $5 billion in damages. And then there's one in New England, kind of up in your area, Andreas, MLS PIN, Property Information Network, versus No Select. And in that case, the parties agreed to settle. The MLS agreed to pay, and the plaintiffs agreed to accept. And then the Department of Justice, not a party to the litigation at all, stepped in and said, hold it, we don't like this. They stopped that settlement. Then you got the $5 billion settlement. NAR, interesting, well, I won't get into the details of it, but $5 billion is a lot of money to come up with. And what finally NAR came up with a proposed settlement. And so at this case, it's still proposed. And the proposed settlement, NAR said uncle, and said, we will take the compensation rule out of the MLS. So in the MLS, there will no longer be this situation where if you doesn't matter, you don't have to have a contract with the buyer, because if you bring in an offer, you're going to get paid by the sell side. And so that provision is going to be eliminated. You can't even say in the multiple listing service that the seller can still pay a buyer broker, but you can't do it through the MLS. So the MLS no longer will have any fields that indicate that there's a commission split. That doesn't mean I can't call the listing broker up and ask them, right?
Which is what we do now commercially.
Yeah, which is very similar to commercial real estate, right? Now, again, that doesn't mean it's the best. Commercial real estate is kind of a closed network, and really residential real estate is more open. It creates more opportunity. Commercial brokers, and I've known many over the years, often hoard their listings. They keep it to themselves, right? So there's lots to keep in mind when you're thinking about this.
But is that sorry, just jumping in, is that a byproduct of the fact that residential realtors came online and had the MLS to distribute their listings, and there was proliferation of Realtor.com? That residential was out there in opportunities. Commercial brokers, some do more. I understand, I agree. But co-broker go broke. To your point, we want to go out and go as far as wide as we can.
Yeah, so here's my issue with commercial can't have an MLS. And the reason it can't have it is that commercial brokers are not willing to put all their listings into a pool. And the residential
commercial brokers or commercial owners or both?
Both. But it's primarily the brokers. They're not willing to put all of their listings in. So we've had commercial MLSs before, and they're typically not very successful because the commercial brokers will only put in the listings they can't sell some other way. Whereas with an MLS for residential property, you have to put all your listings in, the good ones and the bad ones. And that just creates this level playing field. And again, the sharing of the commission. So to get back to this case, what it's and the settlement, two things that are dramatic is the MLS is no longer an offer of compensation. Buyers have to get brokers have to get contracts with sellers before they can show a property. So before you can take somebody out and show them a property, you have to get a contract with them. And that's a major change because, as you know, Andreas, in residential real estate, typically on the buy side, you don't ask for a contract before you show the property because you know you're going to get paid through the MLS. That's a major change, right? And so everybody's speculating what the result is, and everybody's speculating what best practices are going to be. And what I say is you're not going to know best practices for a year or two, right? Because this is going to have to kind of work its way in, and people will figure out the best way to operate. But right now, everybody's guessing.
Well, it's not, nothing changes until something changes. The buy side contract, your agency agreements included provisions to be paid by the buyer and or the seller. It's all in our agreements. In Connecticut, it is anyway. So it always has been. My concern for the MLS is if there's no promise of compensation, which if I recall, was added in '96. Before, the MLS was just that. It was an aggregated place for deals to be disseminated to industry professionals.
Yeah, prior to 1996, with the MLS, the key feature of an MLS was it was a unilateral offer of sub-agency. And the sub-agency was the vehicle that allowed the compensation to flow. And when they did away with sub-agency for its own reasons, they needed a vehicle to allow the compensation to flow. And that's where they came up with the unilateral offer of compensation, right? So, but there's benefit to MLS beyond that. If you wanted to figure out the value of a piece of property, what's the best place to go to do it? It's
broker.
Data that, no, not the broker. The data that's available in the MLS, not even the county recorder, right? Maybe in commercial real estate, but not in residential, right?
Well, the county recorder, real estate data, real-time real estate data is 30 days old, right? You can download Parcel. Anyone can. It'll show you the owner, sales amount, transaction date, some key information. And from there, you still need to understand and extrapolate how to do a comparative market analysis if it's residential, as well as how to trade commercial if it's cash flow based. But to get that data, you need
24 hours
the
old.
MLS is limited.
So the
Commercial,
MLS
we've got 29 listing platforms. We've got a silo process as opposed to an aggregated solution to find all the data, right or wrong.
Yeah, so in an MLS you can find all the data, and it's 24 hours old, not 30 days old.
Most stuff because the agents are putting it in.
That's the key. That's part of what makes it work.
That's right.
You have an army of unpaid people.
An army of unpaid people. We are paid. That's why the fees are so high. What about all the agents who don't belong to NAR, who don't belong to the MLS? Do they not sell homes?
Who's that?
Agents that don't belong to NAR or the MLS?
Yeah, well, so the productive people who don't belong to NAR in the residential space are few and far between. Okay. Right. So that doesn't mean that. So as an example, I'm the CEO of a multiple listing service. I have 12,000 users in my multiple listing service, of which about 1,000 are not members of NAR. So the vast majority of them are, right? It's a small number that are not.
And how many are commercial? Because I know commercial, more and more are coming on, especially residential on the commercial side of the MLS.
Yeah, well, so again, commercial is different. One of the things that's made it different is there are no rules around a commercial MLS typically that force commercial brokers to put their inventory into the MLS. And so as much as we hate to be forced to do things, the reason that MLS works is because we're forced to put the information in. And if you belong to some of the big MLSs, they'll fine you dramatic fines if you don't keep your data accurate. But that keeps the data, it's the golden record. Keeps the data accurate, makes it more valuable. Everybody wants to get their hands on it. even the major portals are actually brokers, so they can get their hands on that data and create multi-billion-dollar businesses out of it.
Well, so I mean, historically, just talking tech for a moment, we have residential shops, Realtor.com, proliferation of the MLS into Realtor.com, into residential big box brokerages, then just putting it all on their own websites, not putting it on the MLS. And in fact, it wasn't until those MLSs started to force all listing data be uploaded, regardless of whether or not an owner wants it listed. We have to add every piece of data to the MLS. Is what's coming out now. Is that not just a data grab?
No, so you don't, if the seller doesn't want their listing in a residential MLS, they don't have to put it in there. They can sign a letter saying they don't want it in the MLS and won't go in the MLS. But few people, there are few people that want that, because they all want as many people to know their properties for sale as possible.
But so recently I've seen a few different letters come out. And you know what? We're running down a tangent. Saul, come back for a sector interview. Let's argue commercial residential MLSs. I would love it. Labor materials shortages, materials updates, marketing updates. Commercial's opaque for a reason. That is changing. There are 29 listing platforms out there to find that data. More importantly, there are tools like Cherry, like CRECo, to access that data. But Chris, talk to me more about material shortages, labor shortages, and then Becca's marketing as we hit. Already it's almost 6:40.
Yeah. Well, the material shortages are nowhere near where they were, let's say a year ago when we were talking about that sort of stuff. The prices are still up, but people seem to be getting what they need, at least to do the jobs. The labor shortages, that's not something that's going to obviously change overnight or over even years. It's going to take a really, really long time to hopefully square away some of that sort of stuff. One thing I wanted to touch on, actually, months ago, we had a conversation on here and we were talking about, I was talking about the idea of communications and being ethical and kind of going in that direction between subcontractors, developers, GCs, CMs. That is something over the past month or so, and since I was on the show a couple months ago, that I have seen a lot more, unfortunately, uglier side rather than the nice side of it rearing its head in regards to people having problems getting paid and things of that nature. So that's something that I've seen quite a bit of, where the people who weren't keeping their reputation stellar over the toughest times, and I'm talking, I don't want to go back to, not going to say the C word, but going back to 2020, the ones that were kind of flying by the seat of their pants and weren't planning and weren't doing things correctly, they're having real financial issues that have kind of caught up with them. And I'm seeing that some of these contractors are starting to get kind of, their reputation is starting to come to light now. There's a lot more events going on. There's a lot of events going on. It's event season. People are out and about and people are talking. And I tend to have a lot of people tell me a lot of things in regards to the industry. I end up being a venting outlet for a lot of people, and a lot of, I think they hope that it's going to get repeated. And, I'm not ever going to throw any names out there. I'm not trying to bring anyone down per se in regards to their business, but I'll tell you what, I'm hearing a lot of interesting stories out there about people not getting paid. Some people getting kicked off of jobs, getting moved this way or that way, looking into different avenues, developers, okay, yeah, we're going to use you. We're going to work on this, and then dropping out at the last minute. There's a lot of interesting things out there. Now, on the other side of it, the people who do have those pretty stellar reputations and the people who were staying, ethical and moving in the right direction, they all seem to be kind of moving themselves clear. They've built the relationships with distributors, so they're not getting gouged as much on supplies. They've been paying their workers, so the temp agencies, when they need it, in the recruiting agencies are more likely to work with them, because the recruiting agencies, when they do have people, don't have to just push them out to anybody. They can be a little more selective If you have 10 electricians or 10 plumbers on the bench and you're a temp agency, you could be a little more selective than you were in the past to get them rolling on a project, because the reality of it is you want to try to grab the largest project with the best contractors so they can stay on the job for the longest amount of time instead of just having these people spot in here and there. So I'm seeing some interesting stuff. And like I said, with event season here, and being at large events, I'm just hearing a lot of different stories, good, bad, and ugly. It's pretty interesting stuff. Made my life pretty exciting. I could hear you better when you're not on mute, Andreas.
So when you're talking reputation and network being your net worth, and pulling that full circle to the debate I was having with Saul, and I'm assuming there is no grade my teacher for contractors and GCs yet. There's no
Sure.
easy way to do that outside of LinkedIn. It comes back to educating the consumer, educating each other. Are you on an MLS? Do you co-broke? Are you pushing that data out far and wide?
Yeah.
Are you a GC who completes his jobs on time?
Yeah.
If so, prove it.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah,
References. And
absolutely.
so on.
There's not a lot of public, even on LinkedIn and stuff like that. There's not really a website out there that people are going to sit there because it's a large, small industry. So you never know when a project manager is going to go from one company to the next. It's going to happen. It happens. I think I mentioned this a while ago. I spend, on Monday, I usually spend about a half hour to 40 minutes just going through and checking out where people have been switching jobs. So there's not a whole lot of, there's not a Yelp where people are reviewing these places like they would a restaurant. So it's a lot of behind the scenes type of stuff. It just so happens that in this area, at least, I am behind the scenes. I'm part of behind the scenes.
You hear the scuttlebutt, you're in the water cooler, you are the
Yeah.
water cooler, given that your association handles all the trades.
Yes. And my job, my job isn't to go out there and just play telephone where someone told me this through the, through a Dixie cup in class, and now I have to pass the message on to the next person, because at the end of the day, I have to take everyone's stuff kind of with a grain of salt. I'm never looking to shut anyone down, but I'll tell you what, I keep an eye and an ear open for everything, because there are a lot of suggestions. I do get out-of-state contractors asking me for people and things like that, and I'm like, let me do things the best I possibly can, but at the same time, I'll be damned if it's gonna take my reputation and dunk it underwater. You know what I mean?
Well, referrals can make or break you, right? So 98% of my business is repeat, reputation, and referral.
Yeah.
If I give a bad referral, I'm in trouble.
Yep.
And if you refer me someone, if they're a terrible client, I still treat them like gold because it was a referral.
Yeah. Same on my end, back and forth. And, you kind of, at a certain point, you kind of hope for the best. And then you just, again, stay ethical and kind of keep moving in the right direction and hope that, what's the quote? It's always the right time to do the right thing. I totally mess that up. But,
well, as the world becomes more and more transparent, as much as the commercial world would like to stay opaque, the more and more clients, customers of mine, they look online. They're always asking about LoopNet or wherever they can see things online. Property Chart, LoopNet, Brevitas, CRECo, the different places, similar to Realtor.com, True, Zillow, right? So the demand for transparency and information is there. And as more and more consumers ask about the contractors and their backgrounds, I think we're going to see more of that website that grade my teacher.
sure.
Although you're not talking about Angie's List, which is like a
That's more
you're
like
talking at a higher level.
Talking at a higher level. And to flip it over to Rebekah, these companies do have ways of, marketing themselves to highlight all the latest and greatest, and kind of leave out some of the, you're not going to see a post of a job that someone got kicked off on.
No, you're not. Nor would I actually advise it, even as a marketing.
Exactly. That's exactly. So.
But I really wanted to get an update from you. I had a conversation about with an industry professional the other day who had kind of a simplistic view of cap rates are going to drop and then everything's going to be amazing. The floodgates are going to open. Everything's going to be developed everywhere. And I was like, there's actually more complexity to development than that.
Yeah.
It's not going to make the prices for materials and the prices for labor and the availability of labor immediately come down, because it's far more, because we have multiple challenges in multiple areas happening and intersecting. And I interviewed a client in a growth market, fantastic growth market. And he has been a broker for 40 years. He's been watching his market quintuple or septuple in size during this time. And specifically, he said he has never seen the high land prices and the high cost of materials and the high cost of labor, like the trifecta,
Yep.
is
All
what's
at once.
really impacting these significant growth markets. Is that it's one thing to see one of them super high, but usually the other ones are low. And so even in growth markets, they're seeing a stalling of development because of that trifecta of significant challenges in place. And one of them, cap rates magically like coming down, isn't like a magic bullet. It doesn't fix everything. It's far more complicated than that. So thank you so much for giving the update on how things are going in that labor and materials world, because it's something that I only speak to because I talk to you.
Yeah, they didn't necessarily come down. They more or less kind of flatlined, and
Yeah.
It's almost like when gas prices don't move for a while. It's like, oh, people start to go, oh, gas prices aren't that bad. No, they just haven't moved. They just didn't go all the way up over to this amount. They're here, and we get used to paying what we pay. But
But you adjust. You have to adjust.
Yeah.
Movement has to happen. Look, for construction, lumber, lots, legal, labor. If all of it's outpriced, then nothing can happen. And if nothing happens, then the government comes in and makes change and forces change.
Yeah,
That's a fair point.
That does force a certain sector of contractors to just stick it out and just do what they have to do. Because, like I said earlier, if the government comes in, especially with this administration and in Connecticut with our local government, and the way they are very blatant about what they're trying to do, if the contractors I deal with don't fight and don't build and just kind of lay down, that's why ABC exists, quite frankly, to make sure that there's this platform for
advocacy
for the merit shop, for these merit shop contractors. Interesting stuff, though. I've been here about 5.5 years, and that's not what I was interested in when I came in. I really didn't know much about it, so it creates an excitement. You could tell I'm coming off of the ABC National Convention in Orlando too, and our meeting and all these summits got you kind of, jacked up about this stuff.
Well, it goes down to something we've said on the show often, and that's paradigm shifts, and they take 10 years to happen, but when they start to happen, they really create change. And I'm not sure it's going to take 10 years for the MLS to change, given all the legal ramifications that are occurring, but the industry itself is evolving, and who knows, maybe compensation will be listed on these commercial platforms as we continue to grow. But we are already at the top of the hour, believe it or not, 6:48 here. Saul, you've got an MLS, you're there. I know we want people growing and joining MLSs, including our commercial practitioners, and more of them are because of the distribution, because of the offer to co-broke. At least I'm on an MLS. I'm happy to be there. I've been a member of NICAR since I was first licensed, and will continue to be a member, regardless of what happens and how the things play out with the MLS. What's your advice for the industry for the next 30 days?
Well, so if you read this settlement, what people are talking about is they're going to have things all worked out by mid-July. So until mid-July, I would continue to do the things that I've always done. Your MLS is probably not going to make dramatic changes until NAR actually makes a move. People still need to list houses. People still need to buy houses. You can still find out what's available, and you can still find out what other brokers are willing to pay through your MLS. I like to say about social media, it's full of people who are not always right, but never in doubt. And so you will find all kinds of opinions, but most of the people haven't read the 108-page settlement agreement. So don't let it get you down. Keep doing the things that you do and that you do well. And you'll know soon enough when it's time to make big changes.
Well, and so where should people go to get the real news on the NAR settlement and what's changing, now that you brought that up?
Yeah, I'd say go to thedataadvocate.com, thedataadvocate.com. Where myself and John Riley and Terry Murphy write about this every single day. Here's the latest that I'm working on. I really have become a curator of information because there's so much to try to figure out, and there's so much myth out there about it. So if you follow us on the Data Advocate, we try to condense it as best we can. But again, the best advice right now is to keep doing what you're doing. Keep working hard, and you'll know when it's time to change.
So don't get stuck in the national headlines, and certainly don't wait it out for potential savings that may or may not show up. And Chris, on your side, to my right here.
Yeah, I'll just stick with kind of what I was pushing along as far as, keep your ethics by your side and just kind of keep rolling in the right directions and try to do the things that are correct and not fall into the temptations of trying to do things just to make a few extra dollars. Trust me, they'll get you one way or another. You'll end up paying it back somehow. So you might as well try to do the best you can to do the right things and kind of keep your reputation intact. And, try to, hopefully we get some warmer weather. I know it was snowing up by Andreas and I today. So it's good to be back, and hopefully everything will, straighten out a little.
With all these companies and the concern on reputation, can I just bribe my GCs in the different groups and say, look, if you don't do well, I'm just going to blast you on Google?
There you go. You could, but they'd probably be like, no one ever does that. But anyway,
yeah, because they're still using Microsoft 97.
If they don't do well, just come back to me for some other ones, or at least.
Well, no, everyone you've ever sent me does very well. So I have nothing bad to say about members of the Associated Builders and Contractors. Just like I rarely have anything bad to say about anything who belongs to NICAR or any other professional organization.
Absolutely. So,
Becca, your side on the marketing, and or brokerage, and or family, given you brought your family into it this month.
Well, as Chris mentioned with convention season, I'll give you a little sneak peek. I'm working on my newsletter, and I was talking with my team today about first impressions and lasting impressions, because we all want to make more than a great first impression. We actually want to make one that lasts over time. And I'm looking at big convention in May, the ICSC, the Retail Shopping Center Convention in Las Vegas. And I have 4 clients with booths and 2 events that we're coordinating. We've got pulled into another one to be another set of hands. Woohoo! ICSC Las Vegas. So absolutely anybody can come to my lunch in Las Vegas on Monday during the show. Message me on LinkedIn if you need an invitation. Always a delight to have. It's open to everybody, and we love having guests. And you typically have attendees from 40 or more states, so it's really a broad intersection of people who come who are in that retail world. But as I think about that lasting impression piece, PR, not just a social media post, but actual PR and publications that goes around, convention giveaways like tchotchkes, but ones that are really useful and that people actually wear and use for a while, or something like that. Or Andreas drinks out of his mug. It's like product.
Well, it's all branded, right?
It's product placement on a sitcom for you, buddy.
Unpaid product placement. There you go.
Right? Yes. Or like brochures and materials. I've got a client that's going to China to meet with a huge multi-billion multinational corporation. And he called me this week and said, I need a flyer, because he didn't have a physical giveaway handy that was the right thing for him to take. So just remembering that it's not just about that first impression. It's not just about that one little post or that one little notification or that one time even shaking hands, but it's about building an impression that lasts a much longer time. So that's what I'm thinking about these days.
So, I'm going to bring up I'm not going to name names here, but I'll bring up a story speaking of impressions, reputation, and just the way in which we walk, talk, and do business. For me, when I go on my presentations, I'm the guy walking in the room with the iPad, latest tech, but at the same time, I've got a big book full of data, marketing plan, everything outlined, ready to go. And I've researched the property, I've researched the prospect. I know everything about you because we live in a world where technology lets us do all of that work and know everything we need to do. Company B walks in to see the same prospect. They've been around forever. Did not research the property. Development hadn't started on said property. And just said, oh, don't worry, I'll get it because I'm me, because I've been around forever. The end of that story is they didn't get it. And they won't get it as people get smarter and look for people with established reputations, people that not only know the way, show the way, and then lead the way for others. And the internet and these conventions, and even the MLS lets us do that, because the MLS even has rankings, I believe, Saul, that push out and promote out and even bring in other providers. So here we are in 2024. The internet is your friend. Twitter and Instagram are your friends. You are who you're with. Have fun in Vegas. Let's not forget, Vegas is not the only convention showing up. Come see us at CRETech New London, right? So green tech, climate tech, the largest gathering in Europe for technology sustainability. You are who you're with. See the latest and greatest. Use our discount code CRECollaborative, 20% off on May 8th or 9th. Assuming you're not at ICSC, or do both. Better yet, do both. And then, of course, come back, tune in, see us next month. I want to thank the people who tune in live for this show, 300 strong, and the people who replay it and tune in across the month. We are now pushing 3,300 listeners and or audience members on every continent of the U.S., of the country, which is exciting. Just to say on a map, to see it there. Mind you, there's only like one or two in certain countries, but we're there and growing. So every month, first Thursday of the month, anywhere you catch your audio, or you're on every major social media channel, please do like, rate, and review us. It really does help. As we go further into the year, we will be hosting many more sector interviews, replays available on YouTube. More to come. Thank you, as always, to my co-hosts for all you do for the industry, for challenging me, and for having a great time with me once a month on this show. And thank you to our audience. See everyone next month.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Real Estate Roundtable, powered by CRECo.ai, your source for the latest in real estate and technology. For past episodes, sector interviews, and more great content, follow us on all social media and YouTube at CRECollaborative. You can also find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. Please like, subscribe, and share. It really does help. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next Real Estate Roundtable.